now joined by Frank Dimino of Angel and, of course, the new Dimino band, Old Habits Die Hard. How are you, Frank?
I'm great. Nice to be here, Jay.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. You've given us a lifetime of music. It's always great to open up a new chapter. Take us back, if you could, to your early days. You know, growing up on the East Coast, you know, at what age did you start getting real serious about, you know, making some music of your own, playing in bands, and, you know, who were your musical inspirations?
Well, I started really young. I started taking vocal lessons at 9 years old. So I started taking vocal lessons, and I did this as I progressed. My teacher was from the New England Conservatory back there, and she talked me into going to do this radio show on Sundays. So it was called the Newspaper Boys of America. but I was very young, and I went there, and I gave them my sheet music that my teacher had given me, and the keyboard player was John Kiley, who used to play at Fenway Park and used to play at the Boston Garden for the Bruins and the Red Sox and stuff. So I used to do that every other Sunday, sometimes 2 Sundays in a row, whatever it was, and then growing up, the first time I heard the Beatles, I thought, oh, man, I got to get into that stuff, you know, because I was doing like a lot of opera. I was doing a lot of show tunes and stuff, you know, young, yeah. And then I decided once I got out of high school, I decided to go to Berklee College of Music out there. So I took composition and arranging out there, and there you have it. I ended up in D.C. with Barry and Mickey with a band, and then eventually we put Angel together. That's a short synopsis of the whole thing, but you know, between Barry, Mickey, myself, and Punky, we all played in different bands together at different times out in D.C. So yeah, we finally put it together with Angel, and you know.
Great. So it was seeing the Beatles on Ed Sullivan and 1,000 Screaming Girls that did it for you?
Yeah, I thought, wow, that's a good idea.
That's a good gig.
Yeah. Let's forget that radio stuff.
Right. I swear there must have been 1 million garage bands from the week after that.
Right.
I talked to everybody, and they changed the world. It was an amazing thing.
Absolutely.
Well, now I know coming from, you know, doing the show tunes and all that into, you know, what Punky and Mickey and Barry were doing in rock and roll, how much of that was a transition for you, and how much of that, you know, vocalizing, that ability did you bring to their more progressive hard rock sound?
Well, I think, you know, what happened was once the Beatles came out, I was in bands, all kinds of bands, all different kinds of bands. And once I went to Berklee, I was in like a top 40 band. We played all the clubs. We had horns and you know, it was like an 18-piece band and stuff like that. So I had done all different. I was very adaptable. I was able to do a lot of different kind of music. And once I started working with Barry and Mickey with the band Max, it was you know, we picked songs that we enjoyed doing, and we all liked the same kind of music. And once we put Angel together, we really did have a plan. We wanted to mix the guitar and the keyboards together in a good way, which hadn't really been done that well up to that point. Mm-hmm. So I think all of us at that point were pretty adaptable and pretty much wanted to know what we wanted to do.
Sure. So you had a vision, you had a bigger theatrical type sound. Mm-hmm. And I know the famous story, of course, Mr. Gene Simmons coming along, who's helped so many artists, you know, get connected or all that. Talk about meeting Gene and being led to the, you know, iconic Casablanca Records.
Well, yeah, it was great. Gordon Fletcher, who wrote for Rolling Stone and Circus magazine back then, lived out in D.C., and he used to come to Bogey's where Angel played nightly. And one night he said, you know, I'm going to start to bring some national acts. When I go to review a national act coming out here at Largo, I'm going to try and get them down here. So he started bringing bands down there, and one of the bands was Kiss. And it was great meeting Gene and Paul and Ace. We had a little conversation. He wanted us to sign with a coin at that time, and we had just signed with David Joseph. So we had already signed a management deal, and we were already on our way to L.A. So we talked. We had a great conversation, and a friendship grew after that. When we moved to California, we had a lot of different labels came down. We had Ahmed Erdogan, Nestle Erdogan, and his brother came down, and we had a lot of different labels. And originally we were going to sign with Casablanca, but we all met with Neil, and we all really liked Neil. And when Neil spoke to, I guess he had spoken to Gene, and after he had spoken to Gene, he said, "Well, I'll sign the band." He wanted to sign the band, but we had already kind of committed ourselves to Capitol, and David Joseph financed the first album on his own because he said, "Well, I'm going to finance it. I know that we're going to get a deal." So he brought out Big Jim Sullivan and Derek Lawrence to produce the album, and we went to Capitol. And when we presented the album, it wasn't. It was an uncomfortable kind of feeling. We thought, I don't know if we want to do this. So we had a meeting with all of us after the meeting at Capitol and said, let's give Neil one more try. So we went to talk to Neil, and Neil was great. I mean, Neil has always been great. He was always great. He was just a great guy to deal with and a great guy to be around. So when we took the album to him and played it for him, it was like, yeah, this is where we want to be.
So I know he was obviously a champion of Kiss, even though it took him a few albums to kick in by the Alive album, and
right.
Certainly the same thing with Angel. He stuck with the band, even though it took some time to
right.
Fully develop. That's something you really don't get to see these days.
No, you don't. You really don't. And it was tough to get back then as well. I mean, Neil was a special guy.
That's incredible. Well, there's so much great from the past. I saw you guys on the White Hot tour. I was working in the industry up in Seattle at the Paramount Theater. You guys with the Gods, and
yeah.
what a great show and tour. And the On Earth is in Heaven and White Hot and Sinful. You guys made some great music. Now the logo, the Angel logo, certainly one of the most special of all time. So that was actually a fan that came up with the logo that reads the same upside down as it does right side up?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and I think he got credit on the album. I believe he did, yeah.
So somebody just kind of passed you a drawing at some point, and you guys kind of flipped out?
He made the logo, I don't know if he cut it out in like cardboard with silver on it or something. I forget exactly what it was, but J.R. Smalling, who was our crew chief back then, he came as we were getting ready to do the show. He goes, "Guys, you got to see this logo." And everyone go, "Yeah, well, let's look at it later. We're getting ready for the show." He said, "No, you got to look at this." So all of us are kind of like brushing him off, and he takes the logo and turns it upside down, and everyone went, "What?" What? And then he turned it upside down again, and everyone gravitated towards him and go, "What is that?"
So who would have thought that those letters would read the same upside down? Incredible.
I know. So we brought the guy backstage and met him and stuff, and we gave him credit for it and paid him some money. So
great stuff.
Yeah.
And I know at the same time you guys were very much about the visual illusions in the big show. I understand it was somebody involved with Sid and Marty Krofft that helped you guys design the effect. Right.
Yes. Sid and Marty Krofft helped to build the logo. They
built the talking logo.
Yes.
Effect. Okay.
Yeah. Because we wanted something like the Haunted Mansion and stuff, but we weren't able to do holograms because of moving every night.
Right.
It's very difficult. It has to be in an exact place. So so he came up with a different design, and it worked for us great. So we used that, and we had Johnny Gahn, who was a legendary guy in building magic stuff. He built stuff for back then. He built stuff for Doug
Henning.
Yeah, and lots of other people. But he's the one that came up with the towers.
Okay.
We appear in the beginning of the show.
Yeah, very, very. I was in the front row there at the Paramount Theater. It was an amazing sight. Did those ever backfire? Any problems with those?
Yeah, they did, but not very often. I mean, one time Barry never came out of his tower. He got all freaked out.
A little Spinal Tap moment.
Yes, it was. In fact, when we did the release party with Eddie Trunk last week, Eddie asked me that question because we did a little Q&A before I played the whole album, and Eddie said, and Greg was there, so I said, yeah, there was a little mishap. Just not many. We didn't have many of them, but one in Japan. We were at the Budokan, and Barry got so freaked out of all the people out there and everything, and he never came out of his tower.
Wow. Well, speaking of your old bandmate Greg Giuffria, I understand he's become quite the slot machine technical mogul out there.
Yeah, I guess he has. He's made a really good living for himself doing that stuff. Yeah.
Wow. Well, tell us about the move to Vegas, because obviously as kids growing up on the East Coast, I know moving to Hollywood and LA was quite an eye opener, and tell us about that move. That Vegas is so close to LA, but then again a different world. Tell us how you've acclimated there and how you've seen the rock scene kind of grow, and a lot of other people now move out there.
Yeah, well, I was in LA for 20 years, so I settled in. I was used to LA. It was my home. But what happened was my mom got sick, and she wasn't able to make the trips out to LA anymore. So I made a decision at that point. I said, well, you know what? I got to go back there for at least a couple of years to get her, settled in, and see if I can get her to come out to LA, or see if I can just get her situated good enough. So I moved my wife and my son was just a year old at that time, and we moved out to Boston. And I thought I thought I was there for a couple of years, but it ended up being like 4 or 5 years that I was there. I mean, it was longer than I thought I was going to stay there. But anyway, I finally had said, okay, I have to make the move back to the West Coast. All my contacts, all the studio stuff I had done was on the West Coast, because after Angel, I did a lot of studio work with Giorgio, and backgrounds on a lot of his projects, and I did the Metropolis thing with him. I did a lot of stuff with him and Keith Forsey.
We're talking about Giorgio Moroder. I mean, such a legendary figure who's still out there today, influencing people in the dance and club world.
Yeah, and also Keith Forsey, who was
Billy Idol.
Billy Idol, yeah.
Sure.
So I had said I have to go back to the West Coast. And what happened was that on my way to look for houses back in LA, a lot of my friends had moved out to Vegas, and they said, "Why did you come to Vegas?" I said, "Vegas? Why would I want to go to Vegas? Isn't that where people go to retire? I mean, you become a lounge act and you retire eventually, right?" Yeah. So anyway, what happened was I took my wife out here to Vegas looking for houses, and I started looking around, and I thought, well, it is pretty nice. It's different than what I thought it was, because there's a huge community out here now. And,
once you get off the Strip, it's a different world.
Yeah. So and it was all of the schools were brand new, and I thought, I think for my kids, this is a better place to bring up my kids. The schools are new, and everything is newer out here and stuff. And I looked at Vegas and LA as Boston to New York, which I used to do all the time.
Yeah. 45-minute flight.
Exactly. You walk in the plane, you get a drink, you cough, and you're landing.
They're heading down.
Right. So I thought, I can do this, I think. And we made the move. And when I first made the move to come out here, it was difficult. There weren't as many musicians out here as I thought, as far as rock. There was still the lounge acts, and there was still the headliner acts that came out here and stuff. Yeah. But rock was still not very prominent yet. It's just grown within the last, I would say within the last maybe 6 years, 5 to 6 years. It's really grown, and it kind of exploded. Sure. And then Killers
and Imagine Dragons and their own.
Yeah, and then when the rock camp came out here, then that exploded even more, because there were more musicians out here. Yeah, so
Sure.
it was great.
Well, that leads us to the album "Old Habits Die Hard." You know, the Frontiers label's been very, very supportive of, classic rockers and melodic,
It really
people
has,
that
yeah.
don't necessarily fit in, with a lot of the death metal or crazy hard rock today. But there's an audience out there for this music. Talk about, putting together this project, because I know you've collaborated with Oz Fox from Stryper and Eddie Ojeda from Twisted Sister, and of course our boy Ricky Medlock from Skinner and Blackfoot, and I know you got Punky and Barry even on the album. Talk about the genesis of creating this album, because I know you're always making music, but what was the thought behind it, and kind of what are you most proud of achieving with the songs?
Well, when we first started it, Ken Ciancimino was the guy that brought it up to me. We were at dinner, and he said, you should do a solo album. I said, I've never been. I've always been a band guy. I've always had a band, and I've always worked within a band. So I've never thought about doing a solo album. And as we talked about it more and more, I started thinking, well, maybe it could be an interesting challenge for me, because I've never really approached anything as a solo artist. So when I decided to do it, he said, let me talk to Serafino at Frontiers.
Yeah.
So he talked to Serafino, and Serafino said, well, send me one of your songs. Send me a song of yours. And I had a song that, which was the song that Barry and I wrote, which is Even Now. And I had an early version of that. And I sent it to him. And he said, absolutely, let's do it. Let's do a deal. Let's do a solo deal. So I went, okay. And then all the pressure started to come on me. And I thought, well, now I don't have a band member to throw anything on. Right. This is only me. So the first thing I did was I talked to Oz, because Oz and I have a local band out here called Vinyl Tattoo. Mm-hmm. That we have J.P. Michaels on bass and Scotty Coogan, who's out with Ace right now, I believe. Sure. But he plays in Blue Man Group as well. So we do dates around here. We do a lot of dates at Vamped, Danny Coker's place.
Yep.
So I talked to Oz about it. He said, yeah, okay, I got some ideas. Let's work on some stuff. So I started working with Oz, and then I called a good friend of mine, Jeff Lubansky, who I had written a lot of stuff with before. And I hadn't seen him in a long time. We talked. We had a long conversation. And he said, well, let's see what happens. I'll come out there and let's see what happens. Because you never know. When you're writing songs, you never know if it's going to click or it's not. Even though we had written before, I didn't know what to expect. So once we got together and started facing each other with guitars, facing each other, playing stuff, it just started to spark. It started to happen really quick. So I had already had 4 songs at that point with Oz, and I quickly wrote 6 songs with Jeff. While Jeff had a limited time to be out here at that time, it was just before Thanksgiving last year, I said, okay, let's structure them all, and then we'll go to Oz's place. Oz has Pro Tools at his house. So we went over to Oz's place, and we did all 6 songs. And then after Jeff left, the next day I went back over to Oz, and we did all 4 songs with Oz. So I took all of the songs and started putting melodies. I mean, I had ideas for what I was doing with all of them, but it was a lot to consume. 10 songs at that point was a lot to consume all at once, So I just started to separate them, do it one at a time, and started working on them one at a time until we finally finished everything. And I finished everything, demoed everything. Then I sent it to Paul. And once I sat down with Paul, then we started to figure out, because Oz and I worked on the drum patterns, and they were good, but there wasn't a live drummer. So I had to convey that kind of message to John Michelli, who was playing drums. And it just all came together so nicely. I mean, it just, when you talk about timing on certain things, this album was one of those things where it was, the timing was right for everything that happened. So even with Ricky, when Ricky Medlock played, he did that solo on Tears Will Fall. He was right in the middle of doing the Blackfoot stuff, the new Blackfoot thing, and Leonard Skinner, and he kept saying, I don't know if I have time, but send the track out to me. He sent the track out to him, and he laid down a great solo, and sent it back, and was like, wow, great, perfect. That's exactly what we wanted. So,
wow,
timing was perfect, and even with Eddie was here. Eddie was at the NAMM convention.
Okay.
And he called Paul and said, "Listen, I'm stopping off in Vegas for a couple of days. What's going on?" He said, "Well, I'm doing Frank's album." He said, "Oh, really? I wouldn't mind playing on that." So we brought him down. We played the song for him, and gave him recorded it, gave him a copy of it to take back to his wherever he was staying. He came back down the next day and laid down a solo. So I mean, that's why I say everything was perfect. Perfect timing for everything.
Now I know Paul that you speak of is Paul Crook, who works with Meatloaf. Why was he a great guy to collaborate as far as the production side of things?
Paul is he's a great engineer. He's done miraculous things with Meatloaf. With that, there's so many different sides to that stuff, the Meatloaf stuff, where he's got so many different players there. And when I heard the recordings and stuff, how everything is separated so beautifully, I mean, I thought, this guy's great. I mean, he's the perfect guy to do what I need to do. And Paul's a good friend. I mean, I've known Paul. I've known Paul since we toured together when he was playing with Sebastian. And Barry and I took out our version of Angel, and we did some dates in Europe. And he moved out to Vegas. Dates were done. We did the Bang Your Head Festival. We did some dates in Switzerland, in Germany. And after those dates, he moved out here to do the Queen musical.
Yep.
We Will Rock You, I think it was called.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so I've known him since then. So and now with Pat Thrall's a good friend as well. Pat was going to get involved at one point when Paul couldn't do it. Paul initially was supposed to do it, then couldn't do it because of his Meatloaf commitments, and Pat stepped in. And then Pat said, "I can't do it now because of my Beyonce or Rihanna commitments. I have to do some mixes and stuff." So just as that happened, I was throwing my hands up in the air, and Paul called and said, "I can do it again if you need me." I said, "Absolutely." So, and it was great to have Pat as well as an ear for anything, because when you're doing that stuff, Paul and I got so close to all that stuff. We were in the studio doing everything, listening all the time. It was nice to have an ear like Pat Thrall to come in and say, "Yeah, maybe you should listen to it this way or do it that way." You know what I mean? It was great to have an extra set of ears.
Sure. Well, I know that you, of course, grew up influenced by that great, 60s music, but the 70s era of which you not only create great music with Angel and, the Led Zeppelins and the Stones and the Who's and the Pink Floyds and all that, is such an iconic era. It seems like so much of the music, even today, is coming off of that blueprint. What was it about the music in the 70s and whether it be the artistic freedom that these artists had or lack of MTV and the internet? What was it about that era that seems just so iconic and still some of the greatest, live touring acts and everything come from that?
Maybe it was the lack of MTV, because once MTV came, it became a little bit more showy than it was playing. You know what I mean? Everything was like kind of and
somewhat manufactured.
Yeah, and look, we had a big show as well, but I think as anyone will tell you, with Angel, the music was always first. We never did any of the illusions. If you came to see us, you know that we didn't do any of the illusions while we were playing. It was always in between songs, or so to say, I know that we were like one of the forerunners of the '80s kind of thing. By the time we got to White Hot and Sinful, but still, I think the '70s were a lot more about the music, I think, than anything else, which was really, really great to be a part of that.
Sure. And even though the business keeps changing and evolving, and we're hoping people will continue to support, music and the whole chain of people involved, But what advice do you give to the young bands, the young singers, young players coming up today? What do they really need to concentrate on or maybe avoid to really have a shot at finding their own style and their own longevity?
Well, maybe this is because I teach and I have some students today, and I find this a lot, and maybe it is a product of what we were just talking about. Is I find a lot of them wanting to go on American Idol and saying, yeah, this is where I want to go, this is what I want to do, and I'm thinking, why? That may be a nice little goal to set for yourself, but that it seems like for them that's the end of all, the beginning and the end of all. I finally made it on American Idol, but that's not what it's about. I said, you have to work on your craft. I mean, American Idol is a show. What do you do after the lights go down?
Right.
Are you playing? Where are you playing after that? What are you doing after that? Suppose you get chosen for American Idol. Suppose they pick you. You do a couple of tours. Then what are you doing? I mean, do you have all your chops down? Do you know what you want to do? Have you played in clubs? The whole thing. There's just a whole dedicated way of doing things. And doing it right and understanding. And it's very difficult right now. I think with. I don't want to sound like a dinosaur, but it's difficult now because of everything is instant. Everybody wants everything now, So
yeah, they're not ready to dedicate 20 years to their craft.
Exactly. Like a lot of people come to me and want to take singing lessons, and I'm waiting for me to give them the secret. And there's no secret. It's the only secret is working at it.
Just like an athlete, you don't go straight to the Super Bowl.
Exactly. But like I say, I think that's the mentality today. That's a tough thing to deal with. So.
Yeah, it is a challenge. The internet generation. They just want to point and click, and
Right.
The dedication, the sacrifice, the perseverance that we all came up with is somewhat a rare breed these days.
Right.
Well, Frank, we're so excited about the new album. Congratulations! Some
Thank
amazing, great music. Can't wait to help spread the word, and we definitely look forward to seeing you perform any of this stuff live. And we appreciate all that you've given us over the years, and thank you so much for giving us another chapter of your life.
Thank you. It's been my pleasure. Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.